In all likelihood, Nintendo will announce and possibly even release their next console at some point this year, whether it's called the Super Switch or the Switch 2, maybe even the Switch U, is still to be decided and to be found out about. However, when it concerns my favorite video game series of all time, Xenoblade Chronicles, a lot of questions start to form, and I want to take today to really just sit back, despite the fact that I'm in the ultimate gamer lean position right now, and just talk about where I think and where I want Xenoblade to go in the future with new hardware. Because I think the Switch itself has been the console generation by far and away the most kind to this IP that I love so much. Now, what is it about the Switch that made Xenoblade so successful and could possibly make the Switch 2 an even better home for it? Well, it's very simple. People deride the power and the actual capabilities of the Switch all the time, but at the end of the day, while it may not be to the standards or the levels of the competitors out there like the Xboxes and the PlayStations, or let alone PC gaming, the Switch is still able to hit decent levels of power and visual fidelity that may not be the best in the market by a long shot, but are decent enough, and are better than what has come before for Nintendo. You combine that with the Switch bringing together both the mobile market as well as the stay-at-home play at your desk or couch market with a hybrid model that the Switch was, and all of a sudden you're able to introduce this IP that has been around for a while but has always kind of lamented its own fortunes, never really being able to break out into, say, the mainstream or just more popular audiences. But for the Switch, the console just didn't have that much at launch, and Xenoblade 2 released in what I like to call the golden window for a new IP. When you're on a new console, there's getting a lot of sales, but just doesn't have a lot of games to play right now. So, if you are able to come out with a big, heavy-hitting title like Xenoblade 2 was back in the day, a lot of eyes will just naturally focus on you, because there's just nothing else to look at. You had Breath of the Wild, which was also on the Wii U, and you had Mario Odyssey, but for an entire year, there wasn't that much else. So a lot of people, myself included, with just wanting a simple game to get into, got into Xenoblade 2 and fell in love with it. Then they poured over Xenoblade 1 with Definitive Edition to show up a few of its weaknesses, and then you come out with Xenoblade 3 and the DLC for both 2 and 3 at different times, and then all of a sudden, outside of Xenoblade X, the Switch became the home for Xenoblade as a franchise. Whereas before, Xenoblade 1 was on the 3DS and the Wii, whereas Xenoblade X was on the Wii U, now it has this unified home, where the game is able to achieve some kind of visual identity as well as gameplay identity. And it tells this one cohesive, overall throughput narrative that is engaging and enticing, while each game can be played separately and be enjoyed separately as an overall experience with a beginning, middle, and an end. For a variety of factors, the Switch became a really good home for Xenoblade Chronicles as a franchise, but as we look ahead, I imagine Nintendo will want to redouble its efforts for this IP that, over the last generation, has seen tremendous growth and value. Now, there's a lot of questions about what the next entry in Xenoblade will bring to the table, but there's a few things that I believe should be standard, alongside more power with the hardware, which we assume that the Switch 2 will have. I mean, it's a new console, we assume it's going to have more power behind it. And while we may not have any specific specifications or even a freaking announcement of the console yet, I think one of the most bog standard things that Xenoblade on the Switch 2 should have are two separate things. One, ports of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 from the Switch. Ideally, the next console would be backwards compatible to just make this really seamless. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do this, but I think it'd be a really great addition if they did, if they were able to upscale Xenoblade across the board to be at least 1080p 60 FPS no matter where you are. One of the biggest limiting factors of the Nintendo Switch, for a lot of games, Xenoblade included, is how you can be kind of stuck at lower resolutions or way lower frame rates than a lot of competitors are able to pump out. And by just upscaling all the games to be 1080p 60 F, not upscaling, you know what I mean though. By bringing all the games up to be 1080p 60 FPS, that alone would put a new spin on the games and breathe new life into a franchise. I've talked about ad nauseum before how I want to see Xenoblade X brought to the next piece of the Nintendo console, and that I think it would be a great home for it because the game is a really gorgeous game that worked on the Wii U, and I can only imagine would work even better with way more powerful hardware behind it. The world is enrapturing, it's gravitating, it's beautiful, and you can explore all of it. That's not something you can say for all the other Xenoblade games. But this has been a lot of basic stuff. What about the more outlandish things? The titles, the new games? Well, I think we will get another definitive edition at some point, and I think it will be for 2, if it's not for X at launch. Or at least at some point during the Switch 2's lifespan, I think we will get a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Definitive Edition. Now, you may be asking, Jmulls, but why? You can understand for Xenoblade 1, the game was really outdated in a lot of ways and was for the freaking Wii of all consoles. And with quite a few gameplay mechanics that maybe didn't hold up the best, a Definitive Edition for that game to bring it in line, the more modern audience, and for more modern hardware for Nintendo, made a lot of sense. Well, you can make that argument for Xenoblade 2 as well. Xenoblade 2 is riddled with mechanics that just feel outdated even when they first came into the scene, that just kind of bogged down the experience on the whole. Now, I'm a massive fan of Xenoblade 2. It's not only my favorite Xenoblade game of all time, it's my second favorite game of all time. I love Xenoblade 2 and I'm a massive advocate, and I've said before how I think the pros of Xenoblade 2 far outweigh the cons. However, if you get another crack at it, and are able to even minimize those cons to begin with, then those pros shine even more. What do I think they should do for Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition? Well, very simple. Get rid of field skills. Or, if you're not going to get rid of them, make it so that you accumulate an overall field score for each skill based on what blades you have unlocked and leveled, not who's in your party. Coming across some random obstacle that's hiding a hot or a chest from you, and you have to completely change out your loadout of blades just for 2 seconds to swap them back immediately, is time-wasty, annoying, and doesn't benefit anyone. It is simply added friction for no real benefit. And I feel if that mechanic is made wildly redundant, then people on the whole would be more receptive to the idea. I think field skills have a genuine, palpable future for Xenoblade as a franchise, but I don't think they want to completely redo how Xenoblade 2 works to make them actually fun and engaging. Because I think there's ways you could incorporate actual gameplay mechanics into the field skills, like actually lining up your high jumps or your leaps or whatever, maybe pulling off a few in-air tricks to level up leaping even further, whatever. Oh, you come across a giant broken down tree blocking your path. Bust out Pyra and attack with her a few times to burn the tree down, etc., etc. There's ways you can make the field skill system cool and interesting from a gameplay perspective. I just don't think for the scope of what I imagine Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition would be, that they would actually want to do it. So I just feel like it's a better use of resources to focus in on other aspects that the game can be shored up and improved with less effort than completely redesigning an entire mechanic to make it somewhat more palatable. Now, there are some advocates of the gacha system in Xenoblade 2. I am not one of them. I feel that the gacha system for blade acquisition is a massive con for the game that turned away a lot of people. I am far more a fan of how heroes were handled in Xenoblade 3, with finding a quest, completing said quest, gaining that world building and that character development through that quest line, and then you acquire that hero/blade to be used in the future. I far prefer that system, but with the way that the blade quests in Xenoblade 2 actually operate and flow, you would need to add a little something to every scene to incorporate an introduction to the main party. They did it a little bit with like Praxis and Fairy, but I feel a way that would be more up that alley, instead of just trying to redesign the entire game and redesign every blade quest, would be to make it so that when you get a legendary core crystal, you just pick the blade you want. You don't need a lot of friction in terms of actually acquiring said blades, because I find the fun and enjoyment out of Xenoblade 2 comes with pairing up the different rare blades with one another for different combos and synergies and different elemental combinations. That's where I really find the fun and interest of Xenoblade 2 lies, and if you want to keep it random for like normal core crystals or rare ones, whatever, but for legendary core crystals, I think it'd be a cool addition to just let us pick which blade we want with a 100% chance guarantee. There's also an easy layup when it comes to Xenoblade 2 that I feel could be added, and that's just multiple save slots. Xenoblade 1 and 3 both have this. Xenoblade 2 doesn't, and Xenoblade 2, funnily enough, is the game that I think is the best for New Game Plus experiences, or for doing new playthroughs with different challenges because of all the blades you can get. That's undercut and undermined by the idea that I have Cosmos, I have every blade on my account, I'm not going to get rid of that save slot whatsoever, and the solution to this being to make a whole new Nintendo account is wild to me. Just add additional save slots. That's all I really want. Now, if we're really being ambitious here, let's talk Metsublade. I highly doubt they would actually do this, but it would be super cool if they did. Metsublade is a concept where the role of Numa and Logos is swapped. So Pyra / Mithra or Numa would take the role of Malos in the game, whereas Rex would pair up with Malos throughout the entirety of the game. And people have made concept art for Metsublade for a long time now, and it's really cool. And the idea of having, say, a new game plus playthrough unlock, where once you beat the main game the way it was originally intended, you unlock Metsublade, and says, okay, you experienced the story the way we intended it, now for a little bit of fun, try out Metsublade. You wouldn't have to take it too seriously, but it would just be a fun little trip to incentivize playing the game again. Who cares if it's not lore accurate? I mean, hell, you can get Shulk as a blade in Xenoblade 2. I feel sometimes just having these new game plus completionist aspects that are just fun and rewarding are cool. There's nothing wrong with them. Metsublade could be something really complicated to actually make, or it could be rather simple and straightforward if you just want to do a simple character swap. Like, yeah, there'd be a little bit, like, retooling that would be needed for the whole Pyra and Mithra dynamic. You could do something similar for Malos if you wanted. Like a Malos version of Pyra, for instance. And then a Malos version of, like, Numa. If we assume Malos is more like Mithra than anything. Retool some dialogue options or some lines here and there. I think that'd be a really cool idea overall. For Xenoblade 2, though, I feel like one of the biggest things that could draw a lot of hype would be to just try another crack at voice acting. I'm a big fan of the actual voice actors for Xenoblade 2. I think they did a pretty good job with what they had. The problem I had came from voice direction, because I think Rex's VA was really good, but he got better later on in the game. Whereas, more often than not, it's really easy to spot scenes that the voice actors were more familiar with what was going on, or the actual tone that was supposed to be had there, than scenes where it felt like they were given the script like 5 minutes before curtain call, and they just said rip it. So yeah, I think Xenoblade 2 is a really great game by itself, and that it doesn't need all that many changes overall, and there's a couple that could be made that would be high effort, but things like retooling the blade system, or the gacha mechanics, and the field skills would go a long way to alleviating a lot of players of that friction that was a big off-put for a lot of people. And then things like doing new VA for the game, or even Metsublade would just be icing on the cake. I talked about Xenoblade 4 at length. I would love to see massive changes to the combat, to make gameplay more interesting, make bosses more memorable from a mechanics perspective. And I think one of the greatest strengths of Xenoblade is how it can look so beautiful despite the fact it's on weaker hardware compared to all the other competitors and all the other big RPG series out there. That it has this really distinct visual style to it in terms of its overall world design, that it's so captivating and just pulls you in and refuses to let go. There is something really special about having a style like that that should absolutely be preserved. But I do think it would be benefited either way from being on more powerful hardware to get better visual fidelity out of it and to get better frame rates out of it. Xenoblade as a series is very near and dear to my heart, and I love it to death. And I am highly optimistic about its future on the whole, because we have seen what Monolith are capable of doing and putting out, even when the hardware doesn't match the competitors, or may be viewed as holding it back. Monolith are able to pull a cat out of the hat on such a consistent basis that I'm positive and optimistic that the series will be good from here on out. But if they're given even more leeway and more tools at their disposal to make a more throughput experience that lines up with what they want to put out, and they don't have to like really hold back because of the hardware, that's really where a new console for Xenoblade would incentivize me the most. The idea that they aren't held back because of the Wii U or the Switch or whatever. That they have more room to breathe and to spread their wings. And while it can be fun to theorize and hypothesize where the series will go from here, and what I would like to see out of it, at the end of the day, it is all still just speculation. And it is entirely possible that Xenoblade and Monolith go in a completely different direction than anything that I put out today. And they have garnered enough goodwill with me, and reasons to be optimistic about the series' future, with me at least, that even if they don't do anything that I've said today, I'm still willing to give them a chance, because their track record speaks for itself. And that's why I feel a lot of people kind of fall or succumb to pitfalls when it comes to speculation and theory crafting, is where that speculation becomes expectations. The expectation for me is 1080p 60 FPS for at least new games going into the future. That's my expectation, and that will be a standard that I want to see them held to. But things like Metsublade or like Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition and stuff like that, I want to see what they put out first, and I'm willing to give whatever they try and put out the benefit of the doubt and to give it a fair, honest shot. They haven't let me down yet. That's the thing. I love Xenoblade 1, X, 2, and 3, and all the DLCs. They haven't missed with me. So I'm just optimistic for the future overall, and I'd love to see what they can do with more hardware. That's my real main takeaway at the end of the day. So with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.